And here we go. Welcome to Rick DiClemente's show. It's called Astrology Unplugged. And I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. And that'll take care of that. And welcome to, I think it's episode number, oh my goodness, 79. Okay. Tonight I'm going to talk about the houses. But before I do, I want to mention a couple of things. Now, I told you all along, you got 10 or 11 planets, and they're in one of the 12 signs. They're also in one of the 12 houses. There are 12 houses. There will always be 12 houses. There cannot be 11 or 13. It's a subdivision of the zodiac. Okay? So when you put a planet in a house, put a planet in a sign, the planet is the energy, and when it's in the sign, it's also in the house. We're going to talk about that tonight. First thing I want to mention is this, though, and I think it's really important. A lot of people have written to me and they've said, well, you kept announcing April 24th. You kept announcing April 24th. See, the newspapers have us programmed to think that some atomic bomb is going to fall on that date. That's not how it works. What I'm trying to tell you is this. We are in the middle of an era. Just like the 60s were an era, this Pluto and Capricorn era started in 08 and it's going to go till 24. It's not going to just shut off and on from 2008 to 2024. So when you look back at the 60s and you see the global change that happened to the collective consciousness, it didn't happen on one day with Patty Hearst. It didn't happen one day on Ed Sullivan with the Beatles. It didn't happen one day with LBJ. It happened during spikes. There were different spike events that happened during that time. That's what April 24th was yesterday. Was that yesterday? 2 days ago. Okay, so the newspapers program you to think it's going to happen on this day, it's going to fade out the next day. That's because the newspapers are talking about fast-moving planets like Venus and Mars and the Sun and the Moon. It's a different story, and it's very minor compared to the era changing. The era changing, which started in 08. And I think it's safe to say to you that since 08, we have learned that we cannot depend on our institutions like we once did. That's the Pluto and Capricorn. We are 2/3 of the way through, but in terms of feeling it, we're about halfway through. So that came to another peak 2 days ago, and even though no events seem to happen, what you'll find out is a year from now, 2 years from now, when you read a book, you'll find out behind the scenes somebody did something of tremendous, pivotal importance 2 days ago. Because that's when the planets did it. So that's what's happening. And now that Mars has passed by Pluto, it's now in front of Pluto. It's going much faster. It's not going to calm down. It's got at least another week to go. It's still dangerous energies. Okay, and you notice there's really a lot of shift going on with China, North Korea, United States, France, the big powers that be. It's all shifting around. It doesn't start on one day and on another day, but we're going through a shift. And you're going to see us 5 years, 10 years from now as a completely different America with a different persona globally. And you're going to see, when did that happen? Well, it happened 2008 to 2024. And it doesn't happen by magic, and it doesn't happen because God wants it to happen. It happens because that's what we created. Or didn't create. All right, now if you go into the houses, the houses are like, I don't have time to read anybody's messages, I'm sorry. So I'm going to go right to my screen. These are the, let me see here. I'm going to share my screen. I can't even see anything, but here we go. Waiting for my new glasses. These are the 12 houses. In everybody's chart in the world, everybody, the first house is in this area. They're different sizes. They're not 30 degrees each. They have nothing to do with the zodiac. Okay? The first house is in this area. It always points directly. This is actually east in the zodiac, in the horoscope. This is east and that's west. But this is the rising sign. This is what's above it was visible when you were born. What's below it was not visible. Planets rise here, they culminate here, and they fall here. But in everybody's chart, you could take a piece of plastic and put this over top of their chart of their planets in the signs. And this, the first house is always here, the second house is always here, approximately. Now, people who are born like in Norway or Finland or South Africa, where the closer you live to the poles, the more those houses get distorted. People near the equator, the houses are rather equal. And that's because it's a time and space system. The zodiac is a space system. 30 degrees per sign. The houses are, what I'm saying to you is, you could have a little tiny house or a great big house because the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees. And the planets move through those houses in the same amount of time. There are many house systems. I'm not going to go into them now. I use the most popular one called Placidus. There are many other ones. They're all valid. They have their different truths. But we're going to talk about what the houses mean. And I'm not going to talk about transiting too much. I'm going to talk about the birth chart. When you are born and you have planets in the first house, when you have planets in the second house, etc. So back to the chart of the houses. Now, when you have a planet in the first house, the most powerful part of a house is the beginning, right here. It gets weaker as it gets through. The most powerful part of the fifth house is right here. As a planet moves up, it gets a weaker and weaker influence on the fifth house until it gets about here, and it actually starts to influence the sixth house when it's 3 or 4 degrees away from that house. So a planet that's right there is actually influencing the fifth and the sixth house. A planet that's right here is very powerful inside the eighth house. It gets weaker, it gets weaker. It still has influence, but its eighth house influence is weakened as the planet moves through, and as it gets closer to the ninth house, it starts to affect the eighth and the ninth house. And as it gets to the ninth house cusp, it really affects it. So, when you talk about the signs of the zodiac, there is no cusp. People say, I was born on the cusp. Well, the newspaper says it changes on the 20th of March, or 21st of March, or the 19th of March, because the newspaper has to give you a date. That's the planets going through the signs. There is no cusp with the signs. They have to give you a date, but every year, the sun might change on the 19th of March. Next year, spring might come on the 20th of March, because the Earth is not going in a circle. The Earth is going almost in a circle, but it's rather elliptical, and that's the reason why. So when people say, I'm born on the Gemini Cancer cusp, and boy, I sure feel like Cancer more. Well, it doesn't matter to me what you feel like. You're one or you're the other. That's why the exquisite zodiac cover has a picture of a diamond with real crystal clear facets. Here's a facet, there's a facet. There's a distinct line. There's a distinct moment when the sun changes from one sign to another sign, from a sign to another sign. There's no cusp. However, when the planets go through the houses, there's definitely a cusp. The one fades away and the next one picks it up. Now, every day, since the Earth is turning at the middle, all the planets go through the entire zodiac. All the planets go through the 12 houses once a day. Once a day when the sun rises, it's in the first house going into the 12th. It gets up to the top, it comes down, it goes down to the bottom, it comes back up. That's because the Earth is in the middle and it's spinning. So I'm not going to get too technical with you, and I want to get right to the definitions. Now, I'm going to tell you, from my experience, you can get your own, do your own research. My experience is the houses are defined very poorly. And I think a lot of the house definitions rely upon old-time translations, and I really think they need to be revamped. And I think they are being revamped. Okay. Now, what a house is, if I have Mars, which is an energy, and I put the Mars in Sagittarius, the sign, then I've got this Martian energy in this fiery Sagittarius, which is really pretty bubbly, and it's really like it's shaking fireworks. Okay, but if I put it in the second house, it has a different influence than the Mars and Sag in the fourth house, or the Mars and Sag in the seventh house, or the Mars and Sag in the 10th house. The houses are where the energy gets put out into your life. What field of energy, what field in your life do these houses express themselves? Now, your first house might be one sign, my first house might be a different sign. Don't confuse the signs in the zodiac with the houses. But everybody's first house is over there where we are normally call 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on a chart, on a clock. Okay? Everybody's 10th house starts at the top. Everybody. All right? That's the way the houses are. Now, the second house you're going to find, I don't care what sign it is, but you're going to find that the second house for everybody has a lot of qualities that are very similar to the second sign of the zodiac, Taurus. The third house for everybody has a lot of qualities. I don't care what sign is there, but the third house for everybody is very Geminian. It's the nature of the third house. The fourth house is very similar to Cancers. I don't care what sign you have. The 10th house at the top is very Capricornian part of you. Now, as we go through, you'll start to see. When a planet is in the first house, the first house is so important that I don't even want to talk about it so much. Okay, the first house is the sign that's rising. In other words, if the people in your birth room got up the moment you were born and they ran to the eastern window and they looked off and they could see the zodiac, if they could see the constellations, the constellation that they see right here would be their rising sign because it's rising. And in the houses, in the house systems, the planets move backward. They move from the 1st to the 12th to the 11th to the 10th. Okay. So that's why you often hear your rising sign, your ascendant, they're the same thing. The ascendant is the rising sign. This is called the descendant. The descendant is always the beginning of the 7th house. The ascendant is the beginning of the 1st house. Ascendant, descendant. Nadir, the bottom. Nadir, midheaven, the top. Nadir, midheaven, ascendant, descendant. Now, when any planet is in the 1st house, the closer the planet is to that 1st house, the more important it is. The more powerful that planet is expressed. Okay? You are a lot like any planet in your 1st house. Period. If Mars is there, I don't care what sign it's in, you are very Martian. Let's say you're very quiet, off to yourself, non-confrontive Pisces with a bunch of Cancer. Okay, you're very quiet. But if your Mars is in the 1st house, I don't care what you got. You're very Martian. And you're going to be pugilistic. Boom, boom, boom. That doesn't mean rude. It doesn't mean you're grotesque. It just means that you're kind of extroverted and you assert yourself. Any planet that's in the first house describes a whole lot of what you're like. It's just that simple. I could tell you a lot more about it, but you're going to start to see. Let me show you the overall. It's not so much important that you memorize this, it's more that you get the idea. Watch how this happens. The first house for everybody is about the self. Now you're going to start to see where the themes come from the exquisite zodiac. The self, the other. Me, us. Aries, Libra. Second house, my stuff, your stuff. My stuff, our stuff. Taurus, Scorpio. Gemini, my mind. Sagittarius, our mind. My local environment, my local mind, my big mind. College, high school, grade school, college, Harvard. My fourth house, emotions. My family, 10th house, Capricorn. My family, my career. My little family world, my political career. So you see, it's very confusing. It will take you time, but houses are similar to the number that they're in. So if we're talking about the 11th house for anybody, I don't care what sign is there, the 11th house has to do with your friendships, which is Aquarius, the 11th sign. Okay, now as we go through, you'll learn more and more and more. Now I'm going to give to you what the books say, what the standard reputation of each house is, then I'm going to give you my take on it. Okay? It's not so much important that you try to memorize this. It's much more important that you get the feel for this. Okay? Houses are very hard to do. They're very much overrated in astrology. So the first house has a lot to do with your immediate environment. It can describe a lot of your early childhood. That's okay. That's fine. The second house. Since the second house is a lot like the sign Taurus, I don't care what sign you have, all second houses have to do with the old-fashioned description: money, assets, my stuff, my values. Okay? That's because the second sign of Taurus is about my stuff and getting anchored. Okay? What I have found, especially when planets come through the second house, when planets transit through somebody's second house, the second house is about your self-worth. If the first house is about yourself, then the second house is about how you value yourself. I've seen people pushed around, transits go into the second house, all of a sudden they're not having it anymore. They're not having it anymore. The second house is I value, what's the stuff I hold close to myself? Tauruses aren't goofs, they're not idiots like the books tell you they're greedy, they want everything to themselves. The Tauruses in the second house are about, what do I hold dear to myself? What do I hold close to me? One of the main reasons Taurus live in a small world, it's not because they're tiny brained, it's they're very content with what they have. Look at the Hobbit. The Hobbit is the perfect example of Taurus. He's got the furry feet, he's got the round door, he's got the garden outside, he's got the furry little toes, he's got the campfire, he's drinking tea, he's got the pipe, he's content. All these other signs go by, you can't be content. Gandalf stops by, you can't be content, you're going on a wild adventure. The hell I am, I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are. You're gonna argue with Gandalf? I'm not going anywhere. I got the Shire. I got my garden. I got the great big pumpkins outside. Well, get ready. And he opens the door and 13 dwarfs march in, right? Total chaos. That's the planet what? Uranus. Exactly what it is. So the second house does, when transits go through the second house, your money can be affected. If you have Jupiter in your second house, that does not mean you're going to be rich. If Jupiter goes into your second house, it doesn't mean you need to go to Las Vegas. That's bad astrology. The second house has to do with your attitude towards the stuff you have, especially your self-worth. When I see somebody with problems in their second house, I suspect there's problems with their self-worth, and I will investigate along that line. Third house. Now, as you go through the houses, just like you read about the quadrants in my book, each house is less important. Okay, they're all important, but the cardinal houses are the main ones. The main houses are the angular ones. These are called the angles, the ascendant in the first house, the nadir in the fourth house, the seventh house and the descendant, the 10th house and the midheaven. These are the main houses of that quadrant. And as a planet goes through these three, its major impact on this quadrant is up in the first house. When it goes in the fourth house, its major impact on this quadrant is in the fourth house. It's less so, less so, less so. Still, they're important. Don't minimize them. But the main parts of the quadrants are the first or the angular houses. So we saw any planet in the first house has got a lot to do with this is how you are. Second house, this is a lot to do with how you feel about yourself. And the way you feel about yourself is going to match exactly with how you feel about other people. There cannot be a difference. You cannot feel one way about yourself and another way about everybody else. It's not possible because everybody's just a reflection of you. Now, the third house, which is the Gemini house for everybody. It's got to do with your brothers and your sisters. It's got to do with your mind and communication. That's exactly what that house is about. Local travel, small errands, locally, the mind, etc. Well, since the third house has got a lot to do with Gemini, as opposed to the ninth house, the Sagittarian house, which is broad scale, long trips, okay, the universal mind, philosophies. The third house, what it really is about, in my opinion, is about your mind. How does your mind function? How does your onboard computer work? When Uranus goes through there, you get a new software update. When Neptune goes through there, you get real confused. When Pluto goes through there, you get deeper. This has a lot to do with the mind, the way the mind is. And the mind has to do with communicating. Now, as to why it is parallel to brothers and sisters, I don't know. And I'm not going to go into my different guesses. But planets get stirred up in your third house. Something happens to your brother. It's very common. Something happens to your car. It's very common. Brothers, sisters, car, local communication. Houses have many connotations. But the main thing about the third house, when you see a lot of activity in the third house, you know that that person has a really interesting mind. If Neptune is there, they have a very intuitive mind. If a lot of Virgo stuff is there, they have a very analytical mind. So, self, my stuff, my self-worth, my mind, and how I communicate. Now, when you cross over to the next angular sign, it's really critical. It's a big deal. When planets transit over here, when planets transit over here, when planets transit over here, when planets transit over here. These are the main big time turning points in your life because these are the four angles. The fourth house is the Cancerian house. Your feelings, your mama, your grandma, your property, your traditions, your background. When planets go in the fourth house, almost every time Saturn goes into the fourth house, almost every time you had to quit your job to go move in with daddy to take care of because he's getting old. Or daddy had to move in with you and you had to adjust your life. Paying your dues, paying your karma. Fourth house is very karmic house. When planets transit through the fourth house, things happen to your feelings and to your emotional nature. The fourth house, I see the astrology, the fourth house really is your foundation. Pardon me while you hold up the Statue of Liberty, and I'm going to chop the base out from underneath it because we can't stand anymore until the base is replaced. You all get this feeling in your life that sooner or later you can't go any further, you can't move anymore because your base is rocky. When planets go through the fourth house, it's a tumultuous time. Oftentimes it's death. But you got to stop the presses, stop the progress, and get your new concrete and your rebar poured because it's the bottom of the chart. And I tell people oftentimes when I see transits going through there, it's time for you to be repotted. How many times do you see people, you may have done it yourself, how many times you see people put up with a plant that they've been trying to nurse and kiss these leaves and put this little thing on them and put a little water and turn them towards the sun, and eventually you just get to the point where you know this plant ain't getting it. It's going to die. That's the fourth house. It's going to die unless it's repotted. That happens to people too. And when you repot it, this happens to people. I see it. And they look at me and go, well, that's amazing. How did you know? Well, I already knew it, and all astrologers know it. Just the masses don't because we're not trained right. You pick that plant up and it's stripping and you dry it off and you get your scissors and you get rid of those bad roots and you evaluate it and you put the chemicals on to get rid of the mites or whatever and you dust it off and you clean it off and you go get a brand new pot and you get brand new soil and it's a big time. And you talk to people and what they talk about. I'm moving to a new house, I'm getting rid of him. That's what they say. I'm new house, I'm getting rid of her. Or a new house, and we got renewed vows. Okay? But it's a starting over. It's a brand new time. And the worst ones are the ones that don't do it. The worst ones are they go through this time period, and they just want to chug along, chug along, chug along. This worked before, it worked now, chug along. And that's just slow, slow, slow decay. Astrology pinpoints these maps. So the fourth house is, well, I don't like it, you know, and Liza and I were put out of the home that we were in, and we're into this whole new home, and we had all this massive stuff happening in our fourth house, and we had to go through all this rebuilding, and now it's all sprouting, and it's all starting to come up rosy because we went through it. We started to rebuild. We're now picking out how we want this room to be, how they want that room to be, but it's symbolic. Don't get lost in your house, in your car, in the color scheme, in the money, in the job, and the boss. None of that stuff means anything. It's all a matter of your spiritual life. All of it. So we know that we were brought here to wipe the slate. We didn't expect it. We were quite happy where we were. We now know that it's kind of like a start over amongst the spiritual path. And I tell a lot of people, she had Neptune going over the bottom of her chart when all this happened. Neptune. And I told many people that's when you're no longer planted in soil and you're planted hydroponically. You're planted spiritually. And if you think you're going to go through life with your feet on the ground and succeed, well, good luck. Because eventually you'll see that dust to dust, there's nothing there. Everything's based on spirit. So it's been a brand new spiritual awakening. The fourth house can be a dangerous place. especially if you've not learned your lessons when the planets go through the first three houses. So a natal fourth house is different than planets going through your fourth house, but yet they're similar. So the fourth house is about getting your emotions straight. If you don't like the way your family's been treating you, if you don't like the family role that you've been put into, then this is a time to have a talk with your family, get things straightened out. Okay? Because it's your positioning. And unless you get that, you don't want to start a new statue with a pebble underneath your foot. You want to get that pebble out, get the foot healed, get the sound footing, because everything as the planets go through 5th house, 6th house, 7th house, 8th house, 9th, 10th, everything's based, it puts more and more weight upon that basis. Okay? So that's why the 4th house is so important. The 5th house, the Leo house. The 5th house is an expressive house, just like it's in Leo. And you might find somebody who's rather quiet, and you put a bunch of their planets in the 5th house, and they're very expressive, and they want to sing in the choir, and they want to play guitar, and they want to do all this origami, and they want to do stage presence and theater. That's exactly why. The 5th house is your children. Traditionally, it's your children, and it is business escapades, and it's self-expression. But the 5th house is the Leo house, because it's I want to express myself. I want to express myself because I gain confidence in myself hello, Suzanne, as I express myself. Okay? Now, the 6th house is really important, a big deal, and I have many, many reasons why. The 6th house. When planets go over here, especially Saturn, almost, and I'm telling you from experience now, when planets go into the 6th house, almost every time the person starts to learn a new skill set. Now, in astrology, traditional, it's your health, it's your skill sets, it's the underdog, it's your diet, it's your attitude towards unions. There's a lot of things about it. But what the 6th house really is you're getting yourself ready for the 7th house. Like I told you in the exquisite zodiac, the 6th house is the final personal house. You're getting ready to meet people. 7 through 12. 7 through 12. First 6, you're getting yourself together. Okay? It's the Virgo house. Transits to the 6th house. In other words, when you're not feeling well and the doctor's kind of like this with you, if Saturn's going through the 6th house, you better listen up close. Something could be wrong. If Neptune's going through the 6th house, it's possibly that it's just psychosomatic, and most times it is. So a planet going through the 6th house can mirror closely how you're feeling and the kind of energy that you're sending to your body. Now, when I see transits go through the 6th house, I see people oftentimes getting themselves more marketable. Now, the 6th house opposite the 12th, the 6th house is a house of service, Virgo. The 12th house, Pisces, is a house of service also. Okay, but they're a little bit different because Pisces and Virgo are a little bit different. People with a lot of 6th house pick up a lot of Virgo traits. Okay? They pick up a lot of Virgo traits, such as Susan, who keeps moving her camera on me as my eyes keep going like this, and I keep wondering when that's going to stop, and my eyes are getting all hypnotized. There you go, Susan. The 6th house are things that you're quite willing. They're very symbolic of things you might volunteer for to help people with. Your attitude towards the underdogs. As a matter of fact, The sixth house are small pets. I lost my signal. The sixth house are small pets like dogs and cats, gerbils. 12th house, elephants and lions, big animals. Big pets, little pets, big pets. So you have this constant theme in the zodiac that the first half is smaller and the big half is bigger. Top half is bigger. So the sixth house can often show your health indications, your attitude towards preventive medicine, your attitude towards diet, your grooming style, because it's all pre-seventh house. As you notice in the Exquisite Zodiac, so much is written about this line right here because it's so important. Now we're coming upon our third angle. First angle was the ascendant. Second angle was the emotions of Cancer in the fourth house. The third angle, the seventh house, people, others. Me, others. Aries, Libra. First house, seventh house. Traditional astrology, me and others. Me and marriage. Me and other people. Me and counseling. Counselors. Counseling others. This is the quadrant of relationships. So to the degree that you have sharpened yourself up, gotten your pants nice and creased, got your mustache groomed, got your hair cut, you're getting ready. To the degree that you've done those things, that prepares you to cross this line to meet other people, which is what the seventh house and the seventh sign is all about. Now, here's what I have found, and this is just in the last couple of years. There's too much emphasis to all the books all around on marriage and relationships. I've seen many, many times planets go into the seventh, they get married, they get divorced, they go to counselors, they work it out, they go to counselors, they don't work it out. They get divorced. The seventh house, hi Melanie. So nice to have all of you come in at your different times and join us. The seventh house is very important, but what I'm really finding is this. We are much less altruistic than we think we are. We are much more selfish than we think we are. Most of the time when we have seventh house activity, it's because something's happening to us. For instance, I got a client, lost her husband several years ago. Uranus is entering her seventh house. Uranus is entering her seventh house. And I told her, you're going to feel new, you're going to feel refreshed, you're going to feel like dating again, and probably somebody younger than yourself. Well, as this planet was getting closer and closer, oh, you're crazy, Rick, you're crazy, Rick, you're crazy, Rick. Uranus gets in the seventh, hey, guess what I'm doing? Dating somebody younger. So the dating of the other in the seventh house is not because you're all of a sudden concerned about other people. It's because you're ready to discover another part of yourself. So the seventh house has a lot to do with the fact that it's a mirror of the first house. You learn a lot about yourself by being with others, which is why Libras love having conversations. They just love to have good conversations with all kinds of people, and they learn a lot about themselves. So I have learned clearly that the seventh really does have a lot about relationships, etc. But what I really notice about the seventh, it tells me a lot about your public persona. When planets go through the seventh, you change the role you're going to play with other people. And that's why you went through the changes you did when the planets were going through the sixth. You're getting ready. So it's not just I want to date somebody. Hey, I'll get married. I've seen very conservative people, very loner type people, all of a sudden want to get married with seventh house transits. Yes. But in almost every case, the person is ready to take a different stance with the other. So that quadrant, 7, 8, and 9, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, is very much about relationships with other people. If anything has to do with really concerned about the other and really wanting to merge with the other, it's the 8th house, not the 7th. It's Scorpio, not Libra. Libra is very much about getting turned on by having a great discussion with you and they learn about themselves. But the 8th house, or the Scorpio house, is very much about merging with the other. And merging with the other is not easy. The 8th house has a very complex reputation. Other people's money. Boy, if that's not the most overblown thing in the zodiac. 2nd house is my money. 8th house is other people's money. 2nd house, Taurus, my money and my stuff. 8th house, your stuff. Yeah, I know a lot of really beautiful Scorpio women that are married to a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. But it's not just that. The 8th house is very simple to me. And it took me a long time to get it, and then it became simple. I'll show you why. I started reading all this stuff, other people's money. This is when you do your last will and your testament. You do your memoirs. You put the assets on the table and the liabilities on the table. And you get your financier and you work through all your finances and all that. Yeah. Those things happen. This is big companies, the insurance companies, IRS, big, powerful, dark companies. But the 2nd house is my value, my self-worth. What I've noticed without a doubt is the 8th house is what happens to my self-worth when I'm with you? What happens to my self-worth? What happens to my self-worth when I'm with you? So the 8th house is about, yes, it's about shared worth. Yes, those things are true. But you got to ask yourself, why? Where do these things come from? So if I'm dating Melody and something transits my 2nd house, then I'm very much concerned and thinking inside myself how I'm feeling about myself. But if I'm having an 8th house transit when I'm dating her, I'm thinking about what am I allowing this relationship to do to me? This relationship is real good for my self-worth in the following ways, and maybe it's not in other ways. So that's how the 8th house is really about. It's what happens to my self-worth when I'm with others. And boy, you see some revolutions going on with people when the 8th house is transited. And now, since we're in this huge Pluto and Capricorn time period now, this era, therefore, since Pluto's so loud now, the 8th house itself is loud for everybody. That's why almost everybody you talk to now is real concerned with what happens to my self-worth when I'm playing soccer, when I'm at work, when I'm at church, when I'm with dad. People are really cognizant now. What am I doing to my self-worth? And 10, 15 years ago, they weren't that cognizant of it. And this is a very good thing. It's a very good thing. It's a measured thing. So what's happening in the 7th, we meet our partners, we socialize, we take a new social stance. The 8th house, we sharpen our skills at partnering. The 9th house is massive, big. Let's look. Remember, self and others. My stuff, our stuff. My mind, our mind. I forgot to say this. My emotions, my little family, our family. My creativity, our creativity. This theme is enhanced upon over and over and over on purpose in the exquisite zodiac. This is the basis of astrology. So if it's my mind in the 3rd house, and now I'm up in the quadrant of relationships, well, I've got my new relationship, and I've got my new role, and I'm a hell of a counselor, and now I'm merging with another, getting married, merging. Well, now what the ninth house is, or the ninth sign is, it's traditionally about law, travel, philosophy, college, broadcasting, religion, big scale. Now, lately, I've got, in my chart, I've got Mars, Neptune right here. I got Mars, Neptune right there. And lately, I've had Pluto and Mars sitting right there, when it's sitting right here, making a square right to that. It's been making a square. And so that natal Mars Neptune's been on fire. I've been invited to all these churches to speak. I've been enjoying this show. This is where the show came about 2 years ago. Broadcasting, speaking on a bigger level, the ninth house. So what the ninth house is, when planets go through here, you will see, think like I've seen people with trouble there, and the father said, no, we're not giving that girl money to go to college. College isn't for girls. It's amazing. I've seen people have radical changes when Uranus goes through there. All of a sudden, they're going to go move to Japan or the Philippines. So the ninth house is real important because you're reaching out, you're learning, you're expanding, and I'm so proud to announce that my next week's guest, I'll be getting regressed by him this Sunday. Stephen Poplin will be with me Sunday. He will be our guest May the 3rd, next Thursday night. And I'm reading his new book, which is just phenomenal. And he regressed me 20 years ago, and I just got like 160 questions already ready for him. And he's a Scorpio, but he's got a lot of Sagittarius in him. That's what triggered my mind here, because he's so big and he's so broad. And we're not talking about little stories here. We're going to be talking to a guy that regresses lots of people into other lifetimes and in between lives. And this is why, because he's got very strong ninth house influence. So don't miss next week. It should be really, really fascinating. Then the next week after, on May 10th, by the way, is Rebecca Bloom. Yes, Pittsburgher. Wonderful Rebecca Bloom, who is a terrific tarotist. And she's really big into the Course in Miracles, and she's really big into tarot, and she's a real natural. So we're going to take them. I'm going to take them apart, and I'm going to enjoy being off of astrology for a couple of weeks. So the ninth house. When the ninth house is heavily populated, Yinzer, you're damn right. The ninth house is populated. People, they want to go to college. They want to travel. They want to go. What are the main things that's Sagittarian? And the ninth house is so Sagittarian. You're living on the outside of a balloon, and the balloon keeps getting bigger. And you're getting so excited, and you're on the balloon, and it's getting bigger. And most people worry about the damn balloon popping, but the Sag is having so much damn fun getting bigger. And they don't even care where they go. They don't care if they fly around the room. They just want to go somewhere. It's an exciting energy, Sagittarius. So you can see what started down in that third house, the mind, has become much bigger in the ninth. Now, one of the most critical places in all of astrology, one of the most critical, is the midheaven. That's right here. That's when the ninth house ends and you go into the 10th. Planets in this area are really, really powerful. This is the Capricorn house. This is the house of your job and your career, your public standing. My home and my family, my public career. My home and my mama and my family, and their career. Well, what the 10th house really is God calling you. There's no such thing as a career. You might think there's a career, but a career really is what? A career is what you're doing. And I started to do this show yesterday, making notes. I started to do the show on geniuses. And I started to think of Dylan and Edgar Cayce and the great geniuses that we've had. a Tesla. And I started to think of, you know what genius is? Genius is you're just so obsessed with what you're doing that you don't care at all about yourself. Now, if you read about Tesla and you read about Einstein, look at his hairdo. Told you how he felt about himself. Whew. You just don't care because you're just so into what you're doing. And to think about yourself, look at Yo-Yo Ma. Genius is getting absorbed in what you're doing. And the 10th house is where you look traditionally for your career. But what I've learned about the 10th house, it's your calling. It's what calls you. And people are obsessed now with their calling. They want to know what their calling is. And what I've learned about that is you just aren't going to find out about your calling if you have blockages. The blockages have to move, or you got to try, or you got to be willing, or at least go like that a little bit, just try to get it to move. Then it's surprising. I think Stephen Poplar's visit could not be more timely because he's going to talk to us about how we are not what we think we are. We are a whole lot bigger than anything we ever thought. This is perfect timing on the very day that Mr. Cosby's going to go to jail. Don't you think that was timely? That's the one thing we got to change in the exquisite zodiac. I wrote about what a great guy he was. We got to go back and take that name out. So the 10th house for many people is their career. It's your public standing. It's very public. So where the 4th house is very hidden and you want to keep it to yourself, things happen in the 10th house, people find out. Here comes the local Pavarotti. They're going to photograph. It's going to get out. The 10th house is your calling. Now, this leaves us 11 and 12. We're now into the final quadrant. And I really advise you, if you've not read The Exquisite Zodiac, you can buy the book on my website, which is starself.com, or you can go there and download the PDF file for free. There's a free copy if you want to read it through Acrobat Reader. But it's greatly advised because it gives you a basis for all these signs and houses. So when planets go into the 10th house, I have one of my top clients 2 days ago had Pluto and Mars sitting on the top of her chart. Pluto and Mars. Pluto gets there every 256 years. Pluto was sitting with Mars on the top of her chart. I'm not going to tell you what she did, but she went on stage. She was a great hit. She shone forth, and she couldn't believe how successful it was. And she was smart enough to know that it wasn't just her that was shining. I just kept going like this during the whole reading. She was right on track, right on track. So the 10th house, the midheaven, has a lot to do with our public persona, our public position, and then it goes into the 11th house, or the 11th house, yes. The 11th house is probably one of the most understated, the most untrue house is the 12th house. The most abused house is deaf and misunderstood is 12, but 11 is not far behind. 11 is treated so tritely. It's the house of hopes and wishes and your friends and organizations. Hopes and wishes and friends and organizations. Woo! Well, what I found, it's your big time hopes and your big time wishes that you've been passionate about for a long time. Big time. Opposite the 5th. The 5th is Leo. Look what I did on stage. 11th, look what we did in the world. Look what I did. Look what I did. See that song I played? 11th, look what we're doing in the world. It's big, big, huge. So what the 11th is really about is this. This is the doctor who gets his business degree. See, he goes to college. He goes to college. He puts in all his years going to college. He climbs to the top like the good goat at the top of the mountain. He's got his job. He's got his career. He's a doctor. He's a dentist. He puts out his shingle. He's making money. He's doing really well. He's in the country club. He's making cash. He's really getting the reputation. But after a while, it grows sour, and he needs to take it to a higher octave. The 11th house is the higher octave of the 10th. This is the higher octave of the 10th. And it's true in all sectors. Second house is a higher octave than the first. The 5th is a higher octave than the 4th. The 8th is a higher octave than the 7th. The 11th is a higher octave than the 10th. So now, instead of him just he or she enjoying being a doctor, he's got to go to the American Medical Association. So the 11th is bigger, broader. I got to have a bigger purpose than just running my office. So the 11th is very, very understated, very underrated. Yes, it means things with your friends and organizations. Yes, but you're more likely when 11th house stuff's going on to get invited to be a board of regent, a member of the committee, somebody who has the chance to really affect that field as opposed to just working it in the 10th house. So 11th is a much, much higher octave of the 10th. And it's treated very glibly in astrology texts. And it's really a shame because it's really a very powerful, good place. It's usually very positive. I'm going to stop in a little bit, and I have some time for you to ask your questions about the houses. Now, of all the audacity of old-time astrologers, you have watched the infant born in the first house. You have watched it grow into valuing itself, getting a mind able to talk and communicate, getting feelings, dealing with feelings, getting a family, going on stage, broadcasting yourself, taking over your domain, taking over the jungle, finessing your experience, finessing yourself, learning your work skills, sharpening all your blades, crossing out onto the dance floor, meeting everybody, getting intimate with people. Now you're meeting people from across the planet. Everything's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The 10th house, you take this great worldly position and you're sharing it amongst the professionals. All of a sudden, everything falls apart in the 12th house. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous how the 12th house is seen. It is a house of hospitals, losses, self-undoing, troubles, chronic diseases, blah, 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 and it makes no sense. It has the worst reputation of all astrology, the 12th house. If your sun is there, you're a loser. I know so many people with the sun in the 12th, including myself, who do just fine. Here's the problem. The 12th house is the house of true service. It's not service in the 6th house, opposite, like Virgo, what you should do. It's the house of service because it's all you can do. When you think about yourself in your life, there's really nothing else you can do. Because serving the self is just useless, if not dangerous. So what I found about the 12th house is this. Yes, it can be undoing. Yes, it can be alcoholism. Yes, it can be being pregnant and brought up in a little house in the woods so nobody knows about it, like in the 50s and 60s. It can be hidden and all that. The 12th house, planets in the 12th house, are the areas in your life that you had better sacrifice, because if you don't, you're in trouble. They are the energies in your life that you had better give to God voluntarily. And when you do, you will be the ultimate victor. You make the other houses look to shame because of power versus force. The book by David Hawkins, Power versus Force. Force is what the first 11 signs of the zodiac are doing. The 12th house is power, because the ocean's just pouring through you. So it is the house of self-undoing, but they forgot to mention that it's undoing in the sense, like Christ said, when you become like the child, the power works through you. That's the beauty of the 12th. That's the beauty. It is the house of guilt. It is the house of karma. It is the big serious house because you're facing your God. You're transcending the first 11 houses. So it's very misunderstood. Understood. When planets go through the 12th house by transit, in almost every case I've seen, when planets go through the 12th house, the person wants to duck out. They don't want to do what they're doing anymore. They've been there, they've done that. They want to step aside. They're over it. They want to go on their vision quest. Okay. So in the theme of the spiral, look what's happened. The self has gotten so full. Now in the 12th house, you're emptying. You're emptying. And the improper way to empty is to martyr, because martyrdom is ego-centered. True emptying, there's no martyrdom. And when you're empty, you're now ready to spark once again in the first house and start all over. That's why it's a spiral. It's not just a circle. So, we're 5 after we're done with our YouTubers. We'll say goodbye to them and they can all go eat and have fun. Thank you for joining us any Thursday night, 8 o'clock, starself.com/unplugged. We'll see you next week with Stephen Pop.